Barbara English is a certified bioenergetic therapist with over 20 years of experience. She is the executive director of Living Ubuntu, a nonprofit organization founded in response to her concern about the effects of mass trauma on populations around the globe. So without further ado, Barbara English.
This is likely to have a little bit of a different tone to it than many of the other presentations today. So I think for starters what I want to do is actually introduce you to the word Ubuntu in case you're not familiar, and it is part of the name of our organization, Living Ubuntu. But since it has a South African origin, a lot of people are not familiar with it. And it other than being part of the name of the organization, it really has a message that pertains to the topic that I want to address today. So I'm going to read you a quote from Desmond Tutu, and it is the one that's on the screen. Ubuntu is very difficult to render into a Western language. When we want to give high praise to someone, we say, "You Ubuntu." Hey, so-and-so has Ubuntu. Then you are generous, you are hospitable, you are friendly and caring and compassionate. You share what you have. It is to say, my humanity is caught up, is inextricably bound up in what is yours. We say, a person is a person through other persons. A person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming of others, does not feel threatened that others are able and good, for he or she has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater whole, and is diminished when others are humiliated or diminished, when others are tortured or oppressed. To forgive is not just to be altruistic, it is the best form of self-interest. What dehumanizes you inexorably dehumanizes me. Forgiveness gives people resilience, enabling them to survive and emerge still human, despite all efforts to dehumanize them. So, on this topic of staying human in the face of inhumanity, I think there's relevant questions. What is inhumanity? What does it really mean to stay human? How do we accomplish that? But I want to start by telling you a little bit of my own personal story, and then why Living Ubuntu got its start. Early on for me in life, a lot of things happened in my childhood that were very traumatizing. And there were various situations within the home, outside the home. And I developed very severe post-traumatic stress disorder very early in life, very severe depression early in life. Did not come from an upbringing that gave me a foundation to function in the world, basically. And a lot of my life early on, early adulthood, was spent trying to figure out how to recover from all that had happened. And at this point in life, my own early story gives me a lot of material for trying to put together this sense of how to stay human in the face of inhumanity. Today in Living Ubuntu, we have a project called Orange County for Darfur. That's certainly another way that we face chronic inhumanities. We deal with the anti-genocide movement, genocide prevention, the atrocities in Sudan and Congo and Burma. And often when we think of inhumanity, we think of those atrocities. And yet, there's a lot of degrees of inhumanity, or a lot of different types of inhumanity. And there's ways that we can cut ourselves off from our own heart and soul, living life in a society in sort of an inhuman way that we demonstrate merely by by coldness, or doing things by routine, becoming the automaton. So within this, there's many ways that you can interpret what I'm talking about, and I think it applies to this entire range. So for me, reflecting back on the things that went on for me early in life, it gave me a lot of ability to recognize that it is really just human beings that perpetrate inhumanities. And I think one of the mistakes that we get caught up in is losing sight of that. And it's a tough thing to stay in touch enough with our own human self, to feel our own heart, to delve into whatever our darkest issues are that plague us, to address and bring healing to our own wounds sufficiently that we can look at another person who commits horrors and still retain their humanity. So this talk isn't about how to see perpetrators as human beings, but that really is an aspect of it. Because the moment that we demonize anybody, we've lost part of our own humanity. And that may be one of the toughest challenges that we have, but it's a really critical piece of this to look at. And it seems to me that too often when we talk about oneness and the interconnectedness of humanity, there's always sort of a but. We're all at one, we're all one except for people that do these things. We're interconnected, except we don't want to acknowledge those that we see as other, or those we don't like, or those we don't approve of. And I think that this is really sort of this is where we need to evolve as a species, is this sense of really embracing our interconnectedness for all of humanity. And recognizing that those that perpetrate horrors are not just, they're not bad seeds. They're not innately evil and somehow different. Part of what can be the hardest challenge to embrace is to recognize the potential within us, under the right circumstances, to commit any of the atrocities that we would seek to stand against. And yet, unless we do that, we're going to continue to otherize and not be able to, potentially not be able to accomplish the peace that we seek. I want to talk a little bit about the start of Living Ubuntu and why. Given my background and a lot of emphasis, like I said, on trying to find my own healing after my own severe traumas. I had been in the field of psychotherapy in private practice for a long time. I entered the field quite young, actually, probably trying to sort through my own background and perhaps doing it a little too early even for me. But nevertheless, after being in private practice for a long time, one of the things that bothered me about private practice was you really can only help people who have enough money to pay you. And so it can be a very elitist profession. And over time that began to be very disturbing to me, to live so much of my life helping people who had a lot of money to pay me to be able to do that. Another factor was kind of coming to a climax right around 2004, reading stories of wars in the world, especially at that time. In 2004, there was a civil war going on, war brutalities were taking place in southern Sudan, but there was also the Darfur genocide that was about a year into its process. And so sort of tracking these stories of what was going on in Sudan in its early stages. And what happened to me is I thought, with my knowledge as a psychotherapist, putting together how excruciatingly painful my own childhood had been, and knowing the extremely difficult process it had taken me to pursue wellness, and to know that I lived my entire life in Orange County, born and raised here, that I had access to resources and to getting help far more easily than most people on the planet. And yet for me, it was a very hard, painful, excruciating journey that many times I thought would be unsurvivable. And when trauma has been pervasive, when PTSD is severe, when depression is pervasive, when the wounds are deep, it can feel unsurvivable, even though it is. So what disturbed me, bringing my own life history combined with my professional knowledge, was to look around the world and see the vast number of conflicts in this world, and to know how many people were being traumatized. How many children were being born into war zones? How many children in a war zone inevitably were not getting their needs met, even if they had the best of intentions from their parents? And where would these people go to heal? And knowing that post-traumatic stress disorder increases cycles of violence, it increases a lot of other things also. But what I couldn't understand was, how are we going to survive on this planet if there are these many conflicts and these many people getting traumatized and this little help? So Living Ubuntu came out of my own knowledge of how hard it is to heal, how painful it is to not have help, how difficult it is under the best of circumstances, and feeling like we need a fundamental shift on many levels, that we've got to increase